So you're talking about self-reliance. That's very important. As we witnessed the United States Incorporated collapse, not in America, but the U.S., a lot of people are worried because they're thinking we're going to lose our jobs because the government is downsizing. We're going to lose our savings because the dollar is collapsing. How can people become more self-sufficient in a system that have taught us to be so dependent upon them?
Well, I think the immediate, like really what we're going through right now is going to be the hardest part, right? Because a lot of people have already lost their jobs. A lot of people
Hmm.
are working two jobs to sustain themselves. But it's going to be a matter of people pulling together, right? Community is I think we're entering a time period where we have to be more communal oriented, right?
Mm, mm,
Um, People have to create the community and work together in their cities, right, in their communities, and build things like farms, right, or gardens, right, so that we're able to eat, right,
mhm.
without dependence on even these major corporations. Excuse me, because a lot of these corporations may cease are actually ceasing to exist right now. So
A lot of the corporations and here in America, like the
here in
businesses, the
America,
companies. Okay.
yes, a lot of the businesses are failing. And
Okay.
so we as a people are going to have to learn to be more self-sufficient. We're going to have to learn to create things, right?
Mm,
Um,
mm,
we have to learn to create jobs even, right? We have to figure out what's needed in our community and figure out how we can be beneficial in our community.
mm. This is your area because you've been talking about this for years. You foresaw the collapse of the United States when you were in college. I remember you talking about it. That was way before Trump. And you were telling people, and you started a church, it was an international church, and you were telling people to become more aware of what's happening, to become more self-sufficient. You said, families are going to have to get together. You talked about communal living. I want to go off the screen just temporarily so you can talk about what that means to be self-sufficient and what that looks like, if you don't mind. But I'm right here, just going off the screen
Sure.
to let you.
Yep. So yeah, being self-sufficient, we have to learn to come together as a community. We need to learn how to grow our foods, right? It's just the simple things that we need. But I think overall, I think the country will be fine. The nation will be fine because there are jobs that will come back into the country. Um,
Yeah, more
yeah,
jobs will
it's just
come
going to
back.
take time
They'll come
for.
back. Yeah,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. They'll come back, but in the meantime, you talk about what people need to do, and it makes people uncomfortable when you talk about communal living, pooling of resources, being self-sufficient. I'm just going to be off the screen just for 1 minute. I want to hear you talk about that. And
Yeah. I Again, I think we need family, right? Families are going to have to come together because things are right now are expensive. And so we need to learn how to cut our expenses. All right. We need to learn how to balance our budget. We need to learn how to find ways to bring our resources together to buy things that are essential, right? We need things like we need housing.
right.
And actually, housing is actually right now becoming more affordable. Right. When we talk about the bubble, right? Everything being overinflated. The housing market over the last 5 years were overinflated. The prices were astronomically high. Right now, you're actually witnessing a time period where the prices of houses is going down, and it is expected to continue to decrease. This year and for some time.
Mm.
What Donald Trump is doing, he's trying to find ways to make housing more affordable. So I think this is a very important time for the people here to invest in housing, but
Mm,
do it in the right manner, right? You don't want to buy the most expensive house, because oftentimes the realtor will advise you to buy
yeah.
whatever the most expensive thing that you can afford.
Hmm.
Obviously, they get paid more based on, how much you're of a house you buy, but you want to take small steps, right? Buy something that's affordable that you can live in and pay it off as quickly as possible.
Mm.
Another thing that I think people need to do is to pay off their debts in general.
Okay.
Find ways uh, to figure out, because debt is not a bad thing per se. Having a balanced budget is important. So now, being able to afford a car outright or a house outright is almost impossible for most people.
Hmm.
So you want debt, but you don't want too much debt. And when you get debt, you want to pay it off as quickly as possible. Right. So
Hmm.
if you buy a house, for example, you shouldn't just make the minimum payments. You want to pay more on your principal, right? You want to pay up on your principal as much as you can, so that you can own the house sooner,
Mm.
right? You want to have financial freedom, and
Mm.
owning a house is obviously uh, a good way to set yourself into the position to have financial freedom.
Yeah, when I was young, when you were younger, you just blew my mind away. How you used to think, because you read Think and Grow Rich. No, not you read Think and Grow Rich, but you also read Rich Man Poor Man when you were like 8 years old, and
Rich
you
dad,
said,
poor dad.
"Mom, Rich Dad." I'm sorry, Rich Dad Poor
Uh-huh.
Dad, by Robert Kiyosaki. You were 8 years old, and you said it's important to own your house. You said buy a house, don't rent if you can. Own your house, and then invest in silver and gold so that you can have a place to store your wealth and to grow your own food. So you were one of the lone voices saying, buy, don't rent. And you kept saying, in the so-called Black community, indigenous community, we've gotten this mindset that I'm going to rent, but when you're renting, you always say you're paying somebody else and you're building up their empire instead of creating stability for yourself. I remember you saying that as a small young boy.
And you never own it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you're a renter for life. If you don't buy, and this is again our problem, not just I would say, as Americans, we don't own things anymore. We've become a renter nation. Like, we are so financially tied up that it's almost impossible for people to own things, right? And the cost of things have gone up so high, right? The
Mm-hmm.
cost of housing is crazy right now. It's higher than most people can afford. But this is the reason why I say as well, we have to bring our money together as families, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because if it's unaffordable for one person, that doesn't mean that it's not unaffordable for multiple people if they bring their money and resources together.
Absolutely. We have some people in the comment section that don't agree that you should pay off your debts because we already have a trust. And we all know that we have a trust that was created with our birth certificate bonds, and that at some point, we're going to have access to our trust. But right now, if you don't have access to your trust and you're high in debt, then it's going to be kind of hard to survive. I know we want to live in the world where everything's paid off, and it is paid off through your trust. But what do you say to that?
I say that's wonderful. And if you can live without getting debt, then that's good.
Yeah.
But I think that being able to use that is a strategy. All right.
Mm.
It's Everybody has the option of deciding how you want to operate your finances. But if you can't afford certain things, you're going to have to go into debt.
Yeah, that's just the
And
reality.
yeah, and again, debt is okay. It's just you have to know how to manage your debt, and you want to
Yeah.
be able to use debt strategically to your advantage, so
Hmm.
that you can be able to afford the car that you want, to be able to afford the house that you want, to be able to afford To be able to get credit cards, for example. Being able to use credit cards is good, right? Because it gives you a window to where you have 30 days to pay off or pay on your credit card. And you can, whatever money that you make during the for your salary or for your wages, you have time to use that elsewhere. But a lot of people right now have high credit card debt because they're
Yeah,
not paying off that balance. And so
right.
what I say is, if you use debt, pay it off. And I think it's also just a good practice to be able to pay off your debts because it makes you financially disciplined.
It
And
does.
I think it's important for people to become financially disciplined.
Yeah, people have to remember that you are an economist. Your degree and your discipline and your way of thinking is economics. So while many of us on this other side that we know we have access to a trust, we know we're sovereign. If you're not discharging your debts using your trust, then you're using debt. So it doesn't make sense to pretend like most people aren't using debt. It's just the reality that in which we've been living. I'm not saying it's good or bad, but some people play the credit game to get ahead. And if you are, in debt, then Mr. Lattimore is saying the best thing to do is to pay it off. I don't know how anybody else out that's listening feels, but if somebody owes me, I don't care if they feel like they're sovereign or not. I expect you to pay me and pay me on time.
Hmm. And I don't believe that all of these banks are just going to crash and go into non-existence. So
Mm,
you're going to
mm,
have to rely on the banks at some level, and that's not going to change. So you're going to want to be able to borrow money, but you're going to also want to pay that back as quickly as possible because it gives you the
mm,
ability to borrow more money, right? And it's a matter of what kind of strategy do you want to use for
mm,
getting ahead in life. But when you're talking about building wealth, you have to ask the question: how do you build your wealth? Right. One of
mm,
the important ways of building your wealth is by owning a house. That's what most people invest in. That's what most people's wealth is in America, is their
mhm,
house.
mhm,
Now, you don't the reason why it's important again to pay off the house as quickly as possible. You never know what your financial status will be 5 years from now or 10 years from now. So if you have a 30-year loan on your house and you take 30 years to pay it off, you could end up uh, not able to pay your rent, or excuse me, your mortgage at some point.
mm,
And anytime that happens, you get 3 months after a while, you'll get kicked out of your home. All right. So you want to be able to pay off your debt so you can own whatever it is that you're buying,
mm,
whether it's your car or whether it's your house. You want to pay it off as quickly as possible. That's
mm.
just, going to the debt if you just choose to go into debt.